Want to give everybody another minute or so? Let's do it. Good morning,
go for it.
everybody. Dan, anything you want to say before we kick off?
No, except that we'll move. We got quite a few topics. I just want to move quickly on them, so.
So do we have any guests that we would need to introduce, or is everybody on board?
Not really. We got our members here, and we do have one of our consultants, Tyler's here, Tyler Knapp.
Welcome,
but yeah,
Tyler.
we've all met each other, so.
Good. And we've all received the agenda. Any additions to or changes to the agenda?
Can we get a motion on approval just to be?
Do we need a motion to approve the agenda? Good, yeah. Kent moves to approve the agenda. Any seconds?
Second.
Good, Molly seconds. Any opposition, any discussion? Vote to approve?
Aye.
Good. I think we're set, Dan. Likewise, we have all received the minutes from last month. No, from the month before last. No wonder it feels like we haven't been together in forever. We haven't. Any discussion on the minutes from the July meeting? Or I guess August meeting?
No, it was July.
It was July.
Yep.
Okay.
You guys should be able to see the screen there.
Yeah.
Dennis, it's okay. Yeah, I'm not going to recap it unless you want me to. So
I'm good. Not hearing any discussion.
Oh, sorry. I just want to call something out.
sure.
This is fine. It looks like Emily is listed as I don't know if as the vice chair.
Oh yeah, correct. Sorry, Molly.
That's okay. No offense taken.
Getting blurry.
Thank you for fixing that, Molly.
All right, I will fix that.
Good. With that amendment in place, do we hear a motion to approve the July minutes?
So moved. I'll
Okay,
second.
Dean, good. Dean moved, and who seconded?
Emily.
Emily seconded. Excellent. Thank you, Emily. And any votes to approve? Or any discussion first, or negative votes against? Votes to approve?
Aye.
So the minutes are official. We're making progress. Dan, if everything goes this fast, we're going to be in great shape.
No, don't worry. We'll grind to a halt here shortly.
Dan, you're going to update us on the RFQ for project manager and implementer subgrantees.
Yes. So we did a first round of pre-qualifications, and it was done by a committee of myself, Chris Dubin, who's on the call here, and also Cy Sarapelli, who you've met. And this is just a basic process we wanted to do just to find out interest level, promote the program, as well as check a box for reviewing things. So we received pre-qualifications from several entities. So we did approve the following groups. We got all 3 NRCDs: Franklin County, Grand Isle County, Winooski NRCD, Friends of Northern Lake Champlain, and Lewis Creek Association. They also have Vermont River Conservancy, who you guys probably know about. I don't know if they've been on one of the calls, and 2 municipalities, Town of North Hero and City of South Burlington. So that's 9 pre-qualified project managers and implementers. Yeah, that's the update on that.
Any questions for Dan? Good work.
Okay, now's the tarp where we ground to a halt. And I kind of want to skim through the document. I did go through it this morning and I just highlighted some of the key sections that I saw. So let me just share that document here. Okay. And just as a preface, so DEC sent this out a few days ago to all the clean water service providers. And they basically, scheduled like for the next 2 months, every other Friday, walking through this. So it's gonna take, it's gonna be at least 2 months before these are finalized. But this is especially important. This document really gets into the meat of what it is that a clean water service provider does and what a project manager has to do, and what, most importantly, what you guys, the BWIC, have to do. So everybody see the screen there, okay? I assume that's a yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. Sorry, I have the video of you guys turned off. So it's somewhat wordy, but I'm just gonna kind of scroll through it and highlight some of these parts in yellow or blue that are critical. Again, this is all about moving a project from an idea to construction. It outlays the process. There are many governing documents that are referenced in this. So these, the Clean Water Initiative funding policy is a very key one that has all the project types, the tactical basin plans, obviously, and other things as well. Again, this is a narrative to how to screen a project for eligibility, to move it from design through implementation, verification, and reporting. Operation and maintenance is going to be a separate chapter. And I'm just flagging this. I'm still going to ask DEC, where does inspection get in? We're supposed to inspect projects. I just haven't seen it referenced yet. It's going to get there at some point. So again, project screening is key. Is it definitely a non-regulatory project? Is it in the watershed projects database? There's going to be a lot of these basic stuff. This guidance, this document is mostly about best used when you've already at least have had some development work done, because you need to have some basic information to begin to move a project down the track, some rough estimates of phosphorus reduction. And all. So again, this is not about project identification or planning or project development or doing a stormwater master plan or doing for example, a reevaluation of old fluvial erosion hazard studies from 10 or 20 years ago. So that's what this guy, again, this assumes you've pretty much at least identified the project and have some basic information about it. The key part here is that the clean water service provider and the BWIC, we decide when we call for proposals from implementers, and we decide how much funding we want to free up at any one time. We just are about to get a deposit of, well, the eventual thing is we will have $500,000 to spend on projects for the first 21 months. This first grant that we just started with the state goes through not just this fiscal year, but also the following fiscal year. Because again, it got a late start and we're still a couple of months away from handing out money for projects. So again, we've got $500,000 to spend over this first 21-month period, roughly.
And can I ask a question about that before you move
Yeah.
on? It says each QUISP and WIC may decide. Do we do that collaboratively? Do we do it independently? What's the relationship there?
Wait, say that again?
It says each QUISP and WIC may decide how and when they will solicit proposals. And what is the relationship there between the clean water service providers and the water quality councils? Are we doing it in collaboration with each other or independently of each other? How does that work?
It's a
Or-
collaborative process. I realize I'm kind of diving into item 7 because it's related to item 3, the formula grant versus the so for the benefit of what's most important, let me, if it's okay with the committee, let me dive into 7 first, and then we'll circle back to 3 because 3 is just a lot of the grant processes that kind of reference this guidance. So since I'm
I don't
halfway
need
down,
permission, Dan. If it's the best way to do it, just go for it.
yeah, I kind of want to do that because this is the thing to really understand. The grant guidance, and I'll show it to you guys, is really just about reporting and things like that, but it references a lot of this guidance, needless to say. And we can't really do a lot with the formula grant until this guidance is finalized. So anyway, so moving along, again, this is we screen proposals to see if they're eligible, and then we rank and prioritize eligible proposals, and then we, working collectively, select proposals for funding. Although you guys, the BWIC, are the primary determiners to what projects get selected. So there's obvious things. It's got to comply with the funding policy criteria. It's got to be non-regulatory. And then if it is on ag land, it has certain qualifications as well for that. The funding policy is really key. Keep reading that funding policy because it lists out all the different types of projects and what makes it eligible or not. And this is particularly important to look at if it's a project on, depending on the ownership of the land and things like that. So again, all of you who want to think about doing projects, really look at that funding policy and know it well. There are some examples where you can have a project that does a little bit of both, a regulatory project and a non-regulatory project at the same time. Those can be applicable, can be fundable, but again, there's a nuance to it. So note that. There is one thing here I'm going to try to get more clarification from DEC on, only because you may remember a few months ago we had Dave Wheeler talk a little bit about the project, floodplain restoration project behind the on Potash Brook, behind the water treatment plant. And it seems that the project they were doing goes above and beyond what the flow restoration plan was looking to do. And at least from talking to some folks in DE seemed eligible. This would seem to imply that a project that reduces phosphorus in an MS4 community couldn't be funded probably for years from now until a town, a MS4 town city had met one of its targets. So we're trying to get some clarification on that one. The ag one, again, there's been a lot of discussion about that, but basically if it's on a jurisdictional farm, it doesn't count. And if you do anything on an ag land, you really gotta talk to AAFM and make sure they're okay with it. So it's kind of threading a needle on that one. Just the take-home message is talk to the ag people before you get too far down the track. There's a little bit more. Again, the BWIC, we do a ranking schedule and scoring. This phrase here, the quiz shall be responsible for applying this scoring process to all eligible projects. I want to get some clarity on that from DEC because, as you'll see here when I go through some of the data, a lot of projects don't have enough information even to begin to rank them. Okay, some of the ones from stormwater master plans are pretty good because there was already a preliminary analysis done by the consultant. But as you'll see when I go through the spreadsheet, which I emailed you guys yesterday, there's a lot of projects that are just a dot on a map, and it's like, hey, this is a good idea, but you can't begin to rank them. So that, again, we're required to follow cost effectiveness calculations to ensure consistency. And hopefully, again, we'll work with DEC to come up with what does that scoring metric look like more. How do you take an efficiency value of $1,000 per kilogram removed for a river conservation project and apply it against some standard to say that's a project that is right on target with a cost estimate, or it's even more efficient than the standard value would say, or it's less efficient. But again, the pollution reduction value and the project budget is really key to cost effectiveness. And then there also is a thing there if you're blending matching funds in or other grants, there's a whole discussion of how that's done. And then there's a basic thing here of the 15-year lifespan. So they walk through some examples of, say, you've got $500,000 and it's design and construction. What's the estimated, load reduction, 400 kilograms per year, design life 15, et cetera, and you get that cost effectiveness. Okay.
Dan, I had one. This
yeah,
is
go
Remy.
ahead.
I had one question on sort of like the matching funds for projects. It was discussed a little bit at the Basin meeting, and so you could, let's say you have a project that has multiple co-benefits, and it's, let's say, like a $500,000 project. You could apply for just a portion of that project's funds that would maybe relate to its phosphorus reduction benefits, and then get funding from other sources to address some of the other things. I'm just wondering how that works in like the scoring, like how that's taken into consideration with the scoring.
Yeah, I mean,
maybe that's getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, but
yeah, it's a little bit. I think the best thing to do is relay that through your comments through Jill, and have her bring it to the discussions with DEC.
Okay.
Because I don't want to try to put words in your mouth. I get it. I think obviously co-benefits, that would be robust co-benefits, but again, the primary methodology is what's its cost effectiveness for phosphorus reduction with the funding that you use just from the formula grant. So that you can exclude the cost of match if it's from non-state sources. But yeah, take those to Jill, then she can bring them to the group. Bring them to Chris Rotler. Again, this is all key about apples to apples comparisons on project efficiency versus compared to other projects. When you have a solicitation round, you will be ranking projects against other projects. Now, initially, hopefully we won't have too much, we'll have enough hypothetical funds to hand out that we won't have to get into too much high degree of ranking, or, I mean, we'll still do the ranking, but if there's enough money to go around, there's enough money to go around. But it is a little challenging because they're assuming that we're making projected costs on construction when the design is not even done yet. So that's a challenge. Most consultants will say, yeah, the final design is going to cost it, but they won't not going to really commit to a construction cost until they're done with final design. So I don't know quite how you know the cost of implementation 2 years out, so. But again, uncertainty could be an element of scoring of a project. Again, the methodology's gonna come up with reasonable values, and I think we'll talk a little bit about that later too. The functioning floodplains tool, which it's not quite final yet, but that'll be a good one to use as well. And then, of course, there's the whole co-benefits discussion. And this is an interesting example because they're saying this example does a 60-40 split between phosphorus cost effectiveness and co-benefits is 40%. That's an interesting thing only because co-benefits are important, but again, the primary reason we should be doing a project is phosphorus reduction, which is why I've always talked about 80-20. So I don't know, is this going to be standardized at 80-20 or 60-40 or 70-30? I don't know. See, here's this kind of gets into conformity with the basin plan. I mean, again, it's going to be, is it in the watershed projects database, and does it mesh with the implementation table of the basin plan? I don't think that'll be a problem because most projects are going to fit within one of those categories of the basin plan monitoring, basin plan implementation table. But again, stormwater master plans, lake watershed plans, those are good things to reference. We've already talked about co-benefits, and we'll talk about it some more. You guys have the guidance to decide how you want to weight co-benefits. So we'll get into that more. And then this list of co-benefits, I think we've captured it all in the spreadsheet or in the table that we were working on. But yeah, you can really spend a lot of time on co-benefits. And again, then we have the screening of project proposals. That'll be done by me as a staff person initially. Say, yes, it's eligible. It looks like the phosphorus reduction benefit using standardized value is this. And then you guys do the co-benefit scoring. But the initial screening will be done by me and other staff here. And then there's sort of a preliminary ranking based upon cost effectiveness, project cost, phosphorus per load. And then, yeah. And then you do have this is a broad thing. You're not obligated to select any projects, and you can reject them if you want. If it's too fuzzy or if it doesn't seem accurate or whatever. And again, cost effectiveness, project cost, pollution reduction, again, is the primary reasons for funding something. But if a project has a lot of question marks in it about, is it really ready to go? You can also determine those things. So that's going to be an interesting part of the application process. So lots to look at in there, and I'll just stop there.
Comments and questions for Dan? It feels like we keep moving in a right direction, but not getting very far.
Right. I mean, this is good. This is good detail. We've been asking for this kind of stuff all along, so it's good to have it there. And also, I would encourage you to. Looks like Tom's raising his hand there. Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, just a question, Dan. Will you be providing, or at least doing an initial, what would I call it, a strategy? You know, hey, if we select these group of projects, we're gonna hit our, I can't remember the number, 90 pounds or 90 kilograms or something like that, just to make sure that when we're going through and ranking, you're gonna come back and say, hey, we're on target or we're not on target. Is that your job, or is it gonna be the council?
It's up to us, the council and us, to work together to call for proposals. And people should feel free to bring whatever proposals they want, but I'm hopeful, and I'll go into the spreadsheet that I sent out yesterday a little more, that we can encourage applicants to say, here's a list of projects we think are all eligible, but A, confirm them, and B, it's to your benefit as an applicant to select projects with a good cost ratio. But we don't want to, I'm not going to limit and say only the following 10 projects can be applied for. No. Yeah. And there are some projects that, you know, for example, it's not so much at the design and implementation, but at least at the issue of development of some projects. There's quite a lot of old projects from fluvial erosion hazard assessments and river corridor plans that were done 15, 20 years ago that need some work and revisiting. So got some other folks raising their hand.
Hey, Dan, on the subject of people raising their hands, I'd love to be in the chair role, but I have lost my video.
Okay. Looks
You
like we got,
handle it for a second.
Yeah,
I'm going to sign off and sign back on to get it back. So keep an eye out for me.
we got Kent. Go ahead, Kent.
All right, thank you. In regards to the stormwater treatment practice calculator, that sort of work, we have been deferring to our excellent environmental engineering firms to provide this sort of information when we are putting our projects in the project tracker. So are we saying that in the future that we can, as a municipality or as a watershed group, can we just go ahead and apply this calculator on our own? Is that the purpose of this, or is this just something for us to get familiar with so we get a general idea?
Well, right now I want you
to bring forward.
Yeah, I want you to see this chapter 6 thing and really work with your representatives to be sure that your questions are getting answered in their meetings with DEC. You know, WOV and Association of Conservation Districts and others. We as a QUIS we're gonna ask you guys as applicants to provide all these detailed questions. I don't want to run the calculator myself, etc. We're going to ask you to work with the consultants to do that. And also, we're going to put that burden on you because I can't begin to fill out a spreadsheet to rank proposals until that data is provided.
So when you say that, you're saying put the onus on the group that is applying as opposed to the council. It will not be the council members' responsibility to recheck this information.
Well, no, I'll check it. So there'll be sort of probably some sort of either a pre-proposal or an actual proposal that hopefully has got all that data, and I can ground truth it and then review it, make sure it looks kosher. Probably check in with Karen Bates. Does this look all right? You know, is this natural resource screening app? You know, there's going to be a process, and then it'll go into some sort of, you know, spreadsheet that ranks different proposals based upon these metrics. And then you guys, the BWIC, will look at it and kind of go, yeah, that looks okay, and vote on it. Although it's going to be kind of weird because you'll have to abstain on many votes if your proposal's in there. So,
all right, because I mean, just working in the field right now with the volatility of prices and having to change the scope of the work on grants that I've already got and putting into effect. I mean, when you change the scope of work, you change the amount of phosphorus runoff reduction. So it gets to be extremely complicated. And just so we know going into this, that this is going, you know, if this could have been up and running 2 years ago, we could have had a lot on the ground for a reasonable cost, and things are changing fast now.
Yeah, no, exactly. That's very true. So, Andrea? You're muted.
Yeah, I just need to step back, and maybe I've lost track, but how is funding what funding is going to support the project ID or updating these old plans that many of the projects that are listed in that database need to have some need to be updated. So what's the funding source for that?
Right. The first funding source, only because it's up and running, is the grant that Addison County RPC, Watersheds United Vermont, the Vermont Association Conservation Districts each have a couple $100,000 out of a pool of 600,000 for what's called project development. That grants are already up and running. So if you need money right now to get started on it, you can do that, access them. We as a QUISP, we can allocate at least, I think it's 3% for development and 3% for ID and 7% for development or more towards identification and development. We don't have those exact details yet of how we do that, but we'll be able to do that to some degree. But how we get authorization, is it a simple email conversation with Karen Bates to say, hey, can we give this conservation district a couple $1,000 to go meet with somebody in this sub watershed? We don't know the details of that yet, but we will be able to use some of this $500,000 of formula grant money towards identification and development. But in the short term, go to those three entities I mentioned.
And are those three entities going to continue to be provided with funds to do that project ID? Or is there
nobody knows.
Okay.
Whether or not there'll be another installment of those funds.
And who's going to be responsible for keeping that database up to date?
The applicants will have to put stuff in the watershed projects database, and the state is really almost ready to create a portal for project managers and organizations to upload data, something better than the batch import file process.
And it's the implementers who are responsible for keeping that database current.
Right, looking at that database and making sure it's accurate with what they know. And Chris Dubin will get into this a little bit, we will also be keeping a separate internal database of just Basin 5 QUISP eligible projects.
Okay. I'm
All right, try not to think about it too much because your head,
okay.
My head's exploding, so.
I got my video back. Other questions?
Okay, and then please take a look at the chat things about the thing there. Dean Pierce is much more systematic than I am of keeping track of all this information. So any more questions on this? Sorry.
Dan,
oh, sorry. Yeah, Dean, just following up on Andrea's last point. The QUISPs are going to be responsible as part of their contracts for checking whatever data is put into the watershed project database. So if Basin 5 QUISP decides that it's going to be the job of the project implementer to enter all that data, I believe it's at least quarterly for some things and at least annually for others, the QUISP staff is going to have to be checking, verifying the data that goes in. I don't know if that's reassuring to you, Andrea, or not, but I think there is some latitude or discretion on the part of the QUISP how much they want to take on of that data entry or how little.
Yeah, thanks, Dean. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about the dashboard issue. So you may remember, and it's really the database. It's you may remember Chris Dubin put together a a dashboard showing different projects. And that's good. And we're still gonna have a dashboard type approach to this, so that so there'll be a simple version of the dashboard where the public can see things, and just a quick glance and easy for reference. But then the back end will be something that you guys can go into ArcGIS online and populate the data in our own internal one. But as I was getting ready for this meeting, I was sort of like, oh, I'm gonna go look at that data a little more closely. And I found out that the initial query we did included a lot of projects that are probably not eligible, which is both a good thing and a bad thing. So I emailed this out yesterday. I don't want to get too much in the back and forth of different projects, but I really want to show you what I did so that you guys who are familiar with these projects, because they come out of a stormwater master plan or they were done in your region or your town, can basically ground truth this. So you should see this this file here. And what I did is I took the initial tab, and then I started splitting out projects that are probably ineligible. And all. The first ones were relatively easy to do because they're from flow restoration plans. And flow restoration plans are requirements in a municipal separate storm sewer system permit, an MS4 permit. So all these projects in Englesby, Monroe, Indian, Potash, Rugg, Stevens, etc., Bartlett, and maybe some of the projects in the Milton Stormwater Master Plan, because they're in MS4, are probably ineligible. But please, continue looking at that to see that. The next thing I did as I was, so that got me down to this list, which was ones that looked potentially ineligible because they're treating road runoff from a hydrologically connected segment. I don't know this for a fact, but I know road projects are pretty much probably not eligible because it's going to be tied to a municipal roads general permit, unless these are private roads or some other reason. So please take a look at this tab more closely. There's quite a few in the MS4 towns. There's some in Charlotte, etc. This one, maybe this is eligible. Big Oak Lane Association sounds like a private road, so maybe that's eligible. Culverts are kind of an interesting category. It's sort of road related, but it's maybe if you upsize the culvert, then it's eligible. There's a couple of ag ones in here, more road ones, lots of stormwater scoping, again, road, etc. Lots of road stuff, culverts, things that, and some of these might overlap with things out of a flow restoration plan. Sometimes there's things that were put in the database years earlier and then they became formalized in a flow restoration plan. So there's a lot in here to look at. I'm not that familiar with St. Albans and places like that. So take a look at those ones, people who are familiar with there, etc. And same thing with Swanton. These roads or these private roads, maybe they're okay if they're private roads, and so on and so forth. And then these ones are kind of what's left over that look pretty good because the category river project floodplain, dam removal, river corridor planning, a lot of those things look pretty good. You'll notice with this database, however, that a lot of them, some projects are very discrete and you know exactly the lat long place that it's talking about, and some are broad because again, this database is a couple of years old. Same thing in the riparian planning. There's 3 different stretches, so we need some lat long for this. So basically, what I'm asking you guys to is look at this list carefully and let me know of, like, especially this tab of likely and eligible. Please look at that closely and let me know, like, no, that should be moved into eligible category. So, Andrea.
Yeah, that's my question is, do we let you know, just via email about what the status of the project? I mean, there's projects that have been completed.
Yeah, let me know that. That's part of the challenge. Yeah, especially ones that are completed. Let me know.
Okay. And yeah, all right. So that's our responsibility to give you the update, and if we had projects that potentially could be added and that we've talked about, do we go to Karen first?
Yeah, best thing to do is if you have a project that's not in the database at all, not this one, but the official watershed projects database, which I got this from. If you got any project at all, the first thing to do is get it in the database with Karen Bates. Work with her, give her what she needs, and she'll put it in. That's the first step, because we got to have a tracking number for it. So get that first in there. But yeah, I'm especially, like I said, it was relatively easy for me to separate out the flow restoration plan projects. But some of these road projects, maybe they're kosher and I just don't know it.
I think a clarification on private road situation would be,
Yeah, private roads projects are eligible.
Okay.
But the key thing is making sure that it's actually going to lead to a meaningful phosphorus reduction. Because if you had 10 homes on, you only got 10 driveways cooperating, that's not much good. But if you really truly capture a large amount, then it might be eligible. So yeah, what we got in the chat. Yes, and as Chris said, please, if you know lat longs for these, or a good point location for any of these, please let me know. Because right now, if we loaded it into the data, into a visual representation, it wouldn't be very useful.
Yeah, and unfortunately, sorry, Dan, I'm going to hijack a comment here, but if that was Dan provided this new list, the likely eligible tab. I said, Dan, this is great, but unless we have lat longs, we can't begin to build it into a web map, or really start there. So that's kind of critical if we're going to move towards a map centric data management solution. And Dan, I don't know if this is like a direct output of the Watersheds Project database, and we just have all of these projects that just don't have lat longs. But maybe there's a crowdsourced solution that we could say throw this into a Google document and just have users log in and try to provide lat longs for them. It is an option, something like that, just to get us to a good starting spot.
Yeah, and like I say, there's only about 100 projects in this likely eligible, and some of them do have lat long. So even if you just, take a cut and paste from these and give me a lat long, go for it. Kate, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess I just had a couple of questions or comments. Some of these are, like Andrea mentioned, clearly out of date. Like at least a year behind. We've had a grant to get final design and now do construction on one of these projects, and it's still listed as a project development, like proposed final design. So first of all, what's the best way to update that? Is that again through Karen? Like, she should know about that, but is it through her?
Go ahead and I mean, I would do both. Send it to I know Karen, ultimately, they're the ones that can, they're the only ones that can update it on their end for now.
Yeah.
So send it to both of us. And even
Okay.
if it's just a little summary, you don't need to fill in all the tabs, but
Sure.
just take a number here and say, yeah, it's completed. Here's a lat long, and it was this grant, and it was done in October 2020 or something. And that way it fulfills two things. The other thing that's useful is that, and Dean Pierce pointed this out to me, is that there's the potential here for we as a QUISP to take ownership or credit for a project that's already been completed and fund its ongoing operation and maintenance and get credit for it towards the phosphorus reduction. So updating this database in any way we can, and if there is an ongoing maintenance element to it, so much the better.
And just to clarify, and I'm sorry if this is, I missed this because I missed a meeting earlier, but the purpose of this database is to sort of track projects on your end, or is it to actually propose projects like the QUISP? Because you guys can actually propose projects, right? So like you could pick something off here and say, we'd like to do this. I'm
Yeah.
just trying to figure out the purpose.
Yeah, it's both. So this is the universe of what's known already. So to the extent some of these projects can be pursued because somebody already identified them, let's start doing that. They need to be further, many of them need to be further investigated, and at least some preliminary scoring conducted to find out. But it's also a thing, yeah, there are some of these, for example, I've talked to Stacy Pomeroy from the Rivers program about dusting off some of the old, river studies that were done 10, 15 years ago. Because in many cases, the project is nothing more than 2 or 3 sentences that were written 15 years ago saying, hey, somebody should do an easement there. Or this culvert is, maybe or this culvert needs to be upgraded. So that's an example where, again, subject to BWIC approval, we might just say, look, I've got 8 different consultants already pre-qualified with CCRPC. Let's get them back out there to these locations. And you'll see, just for reference, I did reference the joint projects that are both private and public. So this one, for example, is one that's already underway with 100% design. So that's an example of the P3P public-private partnership project. So yeah, please dive deep into this, because again, this is a query that was done relatively recently from the Watershed Projects database. So
Molly's got a question.
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, one thing that would be helpful information to have is for some of these projects, I assume they've gone through a project development phase, or especially if some are already at 30% design, but there's already a partner who sort of has, I guess, ownership over the project, is already pursuing it. So to have that information, like if I'm looking at this and being like, okay, what projects are available, it would be helpful to know if a partner has already identified that and I can reach out to them. Is this something that you're already pursuing?
Right. If you go, you can just Google Vermont Watershed Projects database. It'll bring you to the database. You can type in a project number and then click on a report, and it'll tell you who the existing partners already are.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, this was just a capture of the major fields. You should be able to look on that.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right. So yeah, please look at this closely, because essentially this is the universe of projects that are known as of now. So, and we certainly want to identify new projects, but there's a lot that hypothetically just need to be moved down the track.
Wow.
Yeah. But it's a lot smaller universe than I had before, so, which is good news. Yeah, and there's some down here that are just, yeah, and maybe it was just the sorting element, but look down at the bottom there and whatnot. So, all right.
Seems like this is a good segue into number 8, Dan.
Yeah, let me want to stay on track with the co-benefits here.
Oh, good.
Sorry, I know I'm dumping a lot of information for you, and we're not really voting on, you guys aren't really voting on stuff, but I do want to keep working on this, keep pushing all the balls down the track here as we go. Let me do another share. Okay, so the co-benefits, thank you guys for looking at it and not replying all, so we didn't have a violation of the open meetings law or something, but anyway, the changes are in yellow. Again, I know it's a little fuzzy. We're doing the best we can here, but I did some of the major elements referenced in the law or from the rule. Co-benefit means this. Of course, if you look at the recent text of that chapter 6, it's got numerous elements, but trying to think of major categories. So those got bumped up to, by increasing it to 4 points, the max goes up to 8. Same thing I did here. And again, yes, I know a lot of these terms are subjective. What is a larger hazard mitigation, but a little larger flood resiliency project? My example on this of a larger flood resiliency, you might have multiple parcels involved beyond the project, beyond the parcel that located. So it's a little fuzzy, but again, the initial co-benefit scoring will be done by me, and I'll present it to you, and you guys can feel free to tweak the numbers however you want. So because it's ultimately you're voting on it as opposed to machine scoring it. I don't want to get too worried about, well, what's the definition of a larger project? You guys will decide that nuance yourself. And all education benefit, the concept on that was, you know, let's say some of it's pretty simple for educational benefit, but suppose, you know, you did a project that had a pollinator garden there, or a vegetable garden, or a fruit tree on it, and every fall there was a harvest of the fruit, and it was made into a product, and you were teaching kids about growing fruit. So that might be an example of, it isn't just a one-off of a fixed educational display, but there's something about the project that is an ongoing, robust educational interaction. So that was my idea behind that. I got quite a few comments on the ecosystem one, and some good comments by Remy. So to split out ecosystem improvement versus habitat improvement. So that's kind of what I did here with some of Remy's suggestions. On local pollution prevention, Dave Wheeler depressingly pointed out that chloride never really goes away and you'll never get rid of it. Thanks, Dave. So we're never really going to get rid of chloride, so don't talk about it. So
I find that, like, what, shouldn't we be addressing it? I mean, it may never go away, but we should be investigating places about, you know, what's the potential for reducing it, or finding ways of recapturing it. I mean, or that's just not our scope, and somebody else is going to address that.
Yeah, it's really about like reducing use of salt. You know, kind of similar with like PFOAs and wastewater treatment, a little different, but you know, if you can just ban PFOAs, that's way better than trying to pull it out of wastewater effluent.
Yeah.
Similar to chloride and runoff. You know, you could do reverse osmosis, but you know, the energy cost of that is, you know, through the roof. So
But
source reduction is really the key there.
yeah. So there's a hypothetical long list of contaminants. So that's
okay.
why I just want to take chloride out if it was really so unlikely that it's going to be. So we broadly have other contaminants. So, you know. So habitat improvement, again, slightly different than the ecosystem. RTE is rare, threatened, and endangered, etc. On the permit one, I did get some good comments on that of like, why would we want to help a private entity? So I tweaked it to just public or nonprofit. So nonprofit project, municipal, helps a municipality one. And that might be a blended project that addresses a town's 3-acre, there might be town-owned parcels that fall under the 3-acre permit, but maybe it's a joint project. And then there are these official category ones that the state has called public-private partnership projects that they do officially allow to be funded under this program. And that's an example where you've got, a project that's treating both private runoff and then also public runoff at the same time. So, and the most visible example of that is just down the road from me here, the Price Chopper Market 32 project, which treats runoff from that large parking lot where Market 32 is, but also treats runoff from the nonprofit housing developer, the Champlain Housing Trust just behind them, and also is providing a benefit to the Potash Brook, the city of Burlington's goals on Potash Brook. Andrea, yes.
Why would that get more points than a municipality? Just because it's a partnership?
Yes. And again, it's 1 extra point out of 70. So
Okay,
let's not beat up ourselves about it.
right.
Sorry, I don't mean to be blunt, but there's a lot of nuance here with all these things, but in the end, it may not make much difference. But environmental justice, I tried to put a little more detail on it. There, Dean Pierce has some good comments that we need more definition around all this stuff around environmental justice. And the rationale for a non-water quality partner was maybe you've got some project that is obviously has a water quality component, but let's say it involves the local food bank or something, and it's doing things. So it's like, wow, we're leveraging non-water quality partners as well, or it's part of a brownfields redevelopment project, or something like, or it's really partnered with the school or something like that, or it's part of a town forest or something. That was the concept around a non-water quality partner. And there's different ways you can play with a lot of these elements here. The issue of different scores that you have. Do you have 1 ton? Do you make this a 2 and it becomes a 6? Do you make this a 1 and it becomes, there's a lot of ways you can play around with this, the relative weighting of things. This is a catch-all that I just put here in case we can't think of something. And then lastly, this came up before our last meeting. Dave Wheeler sort of pointed out that, in an urban context, some of these things like urban tree canopy are important, or open space are very important in a more crowded urban or suburban community. But in a rural community, there's plenty of open space, et cetera. So I was kind of, and this is an either or on this one. You're either doing one of these. I suppose this can be combined into one row, might make it more less confusing and stuff, and all. So if you're located in an MS4 community, which includes St. Albans, by the way, use this metric, and if you're located and not in one of those, use this metric. But are there any, this last one there, are there any supplemental benefits that non-MS4 communities are lacking in? Like, how would we score that? I put active recreation there only because, and again, it's me, just, I know it's somewhat ignorance or prejudice, ignorance coming from me, but assuming that a city location has lots of public parks for active recreation, but a rural community does not. But anyway, that's why I created that. Creates an asset not typically available. I don't know what that is. All right, any more thoughts on this co-benefits?
Dan, I'll send you a couple comments. I'm sorry I didn't get them to you earlier, but I just noticed a couple things in there.
Yeah, I did try to, you sent me some comments and I thought I put them in there a little bit.
Yeah, you did address it. I just noticed there's a typo under the habitat improvement thing. It talks about native species. It says promotes native species and or removes native species. It should say
Okay.
removes non-native species.
Yeah, or invasive. Yeah, thanks. Okay.
And
Yeah,
then-
yeah. So again, I emailed it out yesterday. Take some time to play with it some more on your own and send edits to me privately, and we'll keep working on this. And again, it's really hard because you could take a lot of this stuff and really simplify it and not get all these 1.2.3.4 point, and make it much simpler. But in many ways, I was trying to give examples of hypothetical points, partially to guide me so that when I do a score for a project, well, you'd say, well, why did you give it 2 points? And I'll say, well, because it does A, B, C, or D, and then, but again, you guys will vote on it in the end of a final score. So.
Dean has a comment.
Yeah, go ahead, Dean.
Yeah, and Dan's kind of started to address it by saying this could be simpler. I just wanted to go on record with my position that I do think it needs to be simpler for a few different reasons, but I won't waste everybody's time getting into it.
Yeah, if you want to come up with a separate version, you hack away at a Dean and send it to me, that's fine. I have no ownership in this. So, all right. Thanks. I know we're grinding. And again, I appreciate your patience with this. There's a reason we're doing this, because at some point this stuff will become real. And we're getting there as the guidance gets out and the project lists. And yeah, we are getting there. I do want to show you a little bit of what our grant looks like from the state, so you can get a sense of what we have to do. So this document is the grant we just signed with the state. There it is. Quist grant ID 03, although it should be 05, frankly, since it's Basin 5, but 645,000. That's the amount. It goes through December 2024. And also some of you have seen these types of things. Yeah, so 645, that's the amount. All the boilerplate, which you guys have seen before. The purpose again is to do water quality grants. What is CCRP's responsibility? We oversee identification, prioritization, development, design, construction, etc. Regulatory projects. These are the basic performance measures that we're reporting on. Any planning done, any linear miles, if we do any project identification, project development, how many projects we did. It's nice. What's really nice about this is these are very straightforward metrics that we're going to be reporting on. How many designs completed, how many projects designed, implemented. So yeah, assessment, identification, development, design, implementation. That's it. That's the categories. We staff the Basin Water Quality Council. That's what this is for. We work with you guys to oversee, these projects. That's what we're going to do. We're going to adopt policies to do things, and we've talked about some of these policies before. which we'll vote on to finalize. We'll do quarterly reporting, quarterly, annual, and final reports. That's what we'll do. There's all the statutes and the guidance. We have the methodology. The amount they were given was done on the state methodology. We have to develop progress. This is what we're going to do. We're going to estimate phosphorus reduction from implemented, designed, and planned projects that we need to do. Good phrase here that the state put in. State acknowledges the precise accounting and absolute attainment of quantitative targets will be subject to many factors. And we will use estimated kilograms of phosphorus to be achieved. It's sort of going to be like a pipeline, and we'll show like, look, we've got 30 projects designed, and we've got 20 projects that are developed, and we've got 5 projects that are implemented. We're moving down the goal. And then again, another good phrase that projects in development or preliminary design may not be ready for precise phosphorus. And we can also provide narrative information talking about our project queue. So that's what we'll be doing. Here is our targets. The term ends June 30, 2026. And we've got to do 10.48 kilos per year. That's it right there. And 41 kilos overall, or 41.9. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in. There's been some email going back and forth this morning. It was this morning that I realized that our contracts have these numbers. I want to make sure that we don't all have contracts that have a mistake in them, because if you look at the formula fund and the distribution, we're getting money for a year that would be for 41 kilograms. And that the annual that's shown in the table should be 41.9 rather than 10.48. So I don't want, I mean, it would be astounding news if our targets are now 1/5 what we thought they would be. But I think 10.48 is a mistake.
Okay,
so
thank you.
That's just a heads up for everybody. Yeah, just a heads up.
Yeah, thank you. Right, so we have to do this tracking, annual reporting. Again, and this is all on us, but we're going to get the information from you. But basically, yeah, well, it's nice. These are manageable levels of reporting and stuff. You know, summary of all projects funded under this grant, etc. How are we doing on the basin targets, etc. And then any final plans, O&M agreements, etc. So pretty straightforward. We got our WIC meetings, etc. Status update on any projects you guys approve, financial, etc. Yeah, and we're going to use this A&R online forms and project database. Again, we're going to look to you guys as project implementers to put most of all this information. When we give you a sub-grant to do a project, it's going to basically say, here's the money to do the project and also do all the reporting for it. Just so you know, because I don't want to have to keep calling you up and have you send the spreadsheet to me and then I send it to the state and maybe I get it wrong. It's like, you guys will be given all that responsibility and enough administrative, you know, and enough funds to be able to do that reporting. Boilerplate stuff, yes, we do. We have an audit every year, so that's not a big deal. Quarterly reports, etc. Yeah, so basically pretty straightforward boilerplate, so on and so forth. Check-ins, and then the rest is the payment stuff. What's nice is we're doing a 25% drawdown right away, so we've got money in the bank, which is good. And yep. And then there's a match limit, etc. And essentially, yeah, we've got 500,000 for projects and then 148 for administrative costs spread out over the length of the term. Yeah, Remy.
So Dan, the reporting for subgrantees, is that going to look pretty similar to like the current DEC design and implementation block grant reporting?
I think so. Yeah. It's basically whatever fields you are seeing in the discussion about databases and the watershed projects database. Yeah, I think it's going to be very similar. That whole data management standards, I think I circulated that to people to look at. There's that document called data management standards. That's going to be a lot of it in there.
Okay.
But it's nothing you haven't heard about before. Yeah, it's all.
Yeah, that's what I figured.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So yeah, so that's what we got.
Excellent. Comments on that?
Just a question, I guess. The phosphorus reduction, is that actually for completed projects, implemented, constructed in 2 years?
The short answer is yes. But, you know, I think DEC recognizes that there's some flexibility of like, we have to show we're making progress. So I think there'll probably be a recognition that, you know, it may not be until the summer of 2024 that the first projects really start to get implemented. But on a quarterly basis, we're going to need to, we as a QuIST need to show progress of like, hey, we're identifying projects. We've issued some sub-grants. And hypothetically, if they get done, we might be slow like this, not really doing many physical projects, and then, but we can show we're on target. We've got a plan. We've got some projects in the pipeline. I don't think the state will, as long as we show we're making good progress, I don't think the state will say, you only got 36 kilos instead of 41. You're fine. At least that's what I'm hoping.
So Dan, just out of curiosity, you know, how many projects a year are you hoping will be completed? You know, to obviously it depends on this scale, but how many project managers do we have? You know, and
I mean, right now we've got 9. We've got 9 that, you know, we've got the 3 NRCDs and 2 municipalities. We've got Northwest RPC, Vermont River Conservancy, and then 2 watershed groups. We've got 9 groups so far. Hypothetically, there could be much more municipalities that could get it, but yeah, we need boots on the ground. And I mean, I'm hopeful that by a year from now, we're handing out $500,000 a year without thinking about it. The hard part I'm having is that it's hard to, I think a lot of these budget allocations are like a sub-grant, for example, is, let's say Winooski NRCD brings a project, the BWIC approves it, and it's $30,000 for design, and you think construction's $100,000. But I would not want to promise the $100,000, nor would you want to just say, I only need $100,000 until that final design is done. So it might be a thing of like, the BWIC approves this project, it looks great. Here's $30,000 for the design, or $20,000, whatever. But we're not going to release the remaining construction money until the final design is truly done and you know how much it's really going to cost. I'm hopeful we have that leeway to do that.
Yeah, me too.
I mean, it's almost like we're going to have a project and it's going to have it's going to have its ID number and our own internal tracking number here. and it's going to be a sub-grant, and it's going to say this sub-grant may be amended, and we just keep amending the sub-grant to give you the money you need. That's what I'm hopeful for.
Yeah, that would make sense.
Yeah. Because we just like DEC, we're going to want check-ins at like 60% design, and might be a thing of or even after 30% where it's like, we thought this was going to be a great project, but it's not. We shouldn't pursue it. We should be able to stop, and not fund anymore. So if it's truly not cost effective. So
where do we
yeah,
stand
Andrea,
on
sorry,
the agenda?
Andrea's got something. Go ahead.
No.
So if the 500,000 is not all expended in that first year, it can carry over so
Yes.
that, I mean, will there be like the terminology of allocation versus, like keeping track of the money that is potentially for that project, but they're not going to reduce the amount of money given to us because we haven't spent it all.
No, and there's
Okay.
lots of language in the grant about, we've been talking to them about, carryovers and,
Okay.
right.
Dan, where do we stand on the agenda?
We're doing pretty good. We did have a discussion about call for letters of intent and pre-proposals. I mean, we could talk about that, but now after digesting more of this guidance stuff and the grant, I don't know if our discussion would be really fruitful at this point. I think my take-home message to you is look at that chapter 6 really closely, work with your representatives to get comments there. Look at that list I sent you and start cleaning it up, and really look at that list to say, oh, I didn't know about that project. What's that about? Go to the project database, Watershed Projects Database online, talk to Karen Bates. Some of them are old projects that are dead. Some of them are probably double named because they were listed broadly 5 years ago, and then they got a new project ID when it became more specific. So please look at that database as much as possible. And as you're working on projects, and I'm looking at Keeler Bay folks, you guys are going to start getting projects, get them into the database. Work with Karen on that, and then it becomes official and legit, and stuff. Yeah. So yeah, not much more to say on that. We might do that. I did, on the number 9 additional updates, I did want to, if Dean Pierce has a few minutes, Dean's been really diving deep on a lot of this phosphorus stuff. But Dean, can you show that spreadsheet we were talking about as far as like the hypothetical cost and categories and things like that? You should be able to share your screen.
Okay, sure. Yeah, let me just try this first. Yeah, I learned in grad school, admit your bias. So I just wanted to admit my bias before I showed these. And my biases are work's really about phosphorus reduction. And that's why I have been thinking about a lot of this stuff since I started. And that I'm starting from the premise that these targets are real, and they're going to be challenging, and they're going to take work. And I think that the QUISP and the councils will need to be aggressive, not passive. Entrepreneurial might be a good word. And I'm concerned about any kind of obstacles, including the way that the guidance documents are written, any roadblocks or obstacles that are going to make our work more difficult. So as you look at the chapter of the guidance, if you think something in the guidance is going to make it more complicated, then register that as a comment. But as a result of all of this, I have been spending time with the formula grant, that is what produces the money, and some other things. And I'm just going to try sharing them now. So can people see a couple of spreadsheets?
Yeah, looks good.
Okay, So the DEC prepared a document that was based on a bunch of spreadsheets that basically start with how much we have to reduce phosphorus. That's at the top part. It all flows down to the bottom, which is where it's how much money we get, and how much money we get is a function of how much phosphorus we can, we're expected to reduce, but then we have to adjust that by how much money the legislature gave us. So I have been looking at this most in detail for my basins because we're the QUIS for 6 and 7, but because I was doing that, I also was able to do a little bit more work and do it for Basin 5. So, you know, the amount of money that's coming to the basin, $645,000, is based on some components. But where that all boils down to is this Basin 5, 41.9 kilograms, and that the amount of money that comes along with that is 645,000. This is why, and these are annual numbers, and this is why I think there's a mistake in that table. So things that have been concerning to me is looking from the standpoint of my biggest basin, Basin 6, if I'm supposed to reduce 145 kilograms in a year, how much does that mean in terms of projects? And people might ask, well, how do you do that? And there are some tools that DEC has created. One of them is the online STP calculator, and then the new one is this interim phosphorus calculator, where you can take different project parameters, plug them in, and it'll tell you how much phosphorus will be reduced. Well, you can use that spreadsheet and back out and come up with the estimates of how much of a type of project you would need to hit our target. I won't dwell on the Missisquoi numbers. I'm just going to come down to the Basin 5 numbers, and the categories of projects I use that you can get numbers out of the calculator are lake shoreline projects, riparian buffer projects, passive restoration, easement and buffer projects, woody additions, putting wood material in streams, floodplain restorations, gully repair work, road work. All of these things, it's possible to come up with estimates of phosphorus reduction for a project. And like I said, I basically just did things backwards. If the target for the Basin 5 is about 42 kilograms, if I've done things correctly, and I haven't had lots of chances to vet this, but I've had it enough where I feel comfortable sharing it with you, we're talking about 2,300 feet of lake shoreline work if we were just doing lake shoreline work. And I realize we're not going to do just one type of project, but I wanted people to have some kind of context. Buffers, if we were all in on buffers because we said we can do buffers easily, that's 26.2 acres. And you can see the rest of the spreadsheet here, the different types of projects. Floodplain restoration with buffer revegetation and easements, that's only 6.6 acres. So that seems like that could be a fruitful way to invest phosphorus reduction money in a cost-effective manner. It seems like that, maybe superficially. Over on the right-hand side, I use some of the same data that Dan shared earlier, actual projects in the Basin 5 area to get a handle on some significant stormwater projects. I came up with 10 of them. They average 44 acres of watershed. They average roughly 43,000 cubic feet of storage. And the benefit of those projects is about 5.5 kilograms a year. So it would mean doing 7 of those or 8 of those in 1 year to hit our target. So this is just to give people some idea. It was for me, for the other basins, some idea of how big the task is, because I've always known intuitively it's going to be a big task. The last thing I did was to just play around. DEC has some average costs for different types of projects. These are figures I think Dan mentioned during his presentation. So $8,000 roughly for a kilogram reduction through lake shoreline. So if you take these average costs, and these are, I believe, legit, I mean, at least as far as what I took out of DEC's numbers. So for example, the floodplain restoration with buffer, revegetation, and easement is actually 3 separate components. So you have to add them together. So if we were just doing those types of projects in the northern Lake Champlain, that shoreline work that we just talked about, that's only about $350,000. The buffers, $200,000. Passive restoration, that's up to $635,000. The projects that I thought initially looked appealing, this limited number of acres of buffer of floodplain restoration with buffer, that's actually pretty pricey at 1.3. And then Forest Road, if I put the numbers in the right column, it's 600,000. So, and then, going over to the developed stormwater projects, those are very pricey, the priciest of all. So those maybe don't look like such a good deal at about $2 million. Anyway, the numbers, the sources of these costs are down on the left-hand side. One of the things that has been mentioned is that these numbers are out of date and they don't reflect all the cost increases that we've seen recently. I clearly agree. And we're going to have to see those kinds of numbers updated with some frequency before we can, really do something. But I wanted to get some context. And I guess I'll just leave it there since we're almost out of time.
That's awesome, Dean. Can you, I think you sent this to me, but if you did more work, if you just want to resend them to me and I'll make some PDF grabs just to put on the Facebook page, or not the Facebook, the quiz page. So make it, when I do the minutes and people look at it, they can see what we're talking about here. Yeah, I think Dean's work is awesome on this. I can't thank him enough for this because it does help to focus things and really start to think about those targets, and it'd be very valuable for us going forward. So
thank you, Dean. That was really helpful. More conversation for Dean.
Yeah, and then as far as updates, the one of the things I've talked to, there is part of the chapters. Some of the chapters have been finalized. I think I sent you a link a while back, but I'll send them out again as separate document. Chapters 2, 3, and 4 of the guidance are done now. There was a public comment period. They finalized them and they're done. As a result of that, one thing we're going to do here at the RPC, you saw the RFQ for the subcontractors, and that went out the door a couple of months ago, and we pre-qualified 8 of the firms. The sub-grantees one, again, that was just a pre-qualification process on that. And since you guys were bidding on it, I didn't show you the form ahead of time, but obviously many of you guys replied and thought it was okay. There's parts in chapter 6 that are going to be more fleshed out about sub-grants and this little more detail about how we give out sub-grants as the CCRPC. So once chapter 6 is finalized, and I ran this by Chris Rotler and he thought it was a good plan, is that once chapter 6 is finalized, we will probably amend our CCRPC procurement policies to put a little more detail on what sub-grants to you guys look like, you as project implementers. And before we at the RPC vote on those tweaks to our procurement text, we'll have you guys bless it and make sure you're comfortable with the language. Because it does get into these questions about, who brings a project forward. So we should have a little more detail about, who are the sponsors, who are the partners who developed a project, and expectations around how sub-grants are generally given out. And in turn, it might have language in our procurement policy saying sub-grantees are expected to provide all the reports requested, things like that. Or sub-grantees are expected to be familiar with Act 76, the guidance, the QIP funding policy. So it'll be a little two-way street on that stuff. So that's where we are. And then, as an RPC, as a quiz, we're, meeting with the state and going to be hashing out that chapter 6, in the coming weeks. So that's where we are as far as any updates. But if anybody else has updates or guests here want to say something, go ahead.
I think the big
Um,
question then, oh, whoever that was, go ahead.
Sorry, Ken.
Okay.
I guess,
Sorry.
Dan, one thing that I'm, kind of thinking about, and I'll probably bring this up with Jill and the Association of Conservation Districts, but right now we're in a little bit of limbo where we have, design and implementation block grants available to us. We also have, trees for streams grants available to us for riparian plantings and that kind of stuff. So, we're in this little bit of a straddle of like, well, do we save these projects to bring to the QUISP, or, or do we apply for them now if we have the capacity to move them forward? So, it's something that I'll bring up to Jill and sort of see what the future of some of those funding sources are, and if things are going to be moving more toward the QUISP. But from the Winooski district's perspective, it's a little bit of straddle mode of, what can we do now with what we have, and where are we going to be in what time frame with this funding.
Yeah.
So
Well,
just meant to
One
say.
thing I mentioned was that there is supposed to be a separate guidance and separate funding stream for operations and maintenance, which we'll administer. So to some extent, if you get a project done, then we can just, and we want to quote unquote claim it as a Basin 5 project, then we could just potentially give an operation and maintenance grant to you on an annual basis. So. But yeah, I mean, any design work that you can get funded now, go for it. Because it'll only make it easier to get a money from a quiz, And there's so many projects that don't even have 30% design done. But thanks for that, Remy. Yeah, and then the last item there, I think the policies and procedures, I did run these all by Chris Rotler, and I just didn't have time to put them on the agenda. I wanted to get more feedback from him, so I think we'll do probably final votes on those 3 elements, because chapters 2, 3, and 4 are done. I can double check that the wording is meshes with it. So that's where we're at.
Which then raises the question, Dan, where do we go from here? What does October look like?
Well, like I said, we'll definitely get those policies done. I think it, yeah, I mean, I think I do want to maybe have a little more discussion with Rivers Management Program staff, because there are the streams in the MS4 towns are a little different, because until the flow regimes are stabilized, it's probably not a good idea to do a project on those impaired streams. But there are streams that are not in an MS4 town, or don't have a flow restoration plan that projects could be done on. And according to Stacy Pomeroy, it would be a good idea to go, and Gretchen Alexander, most likely, it would be a good idea to revisit some of those streams. And it would be nice to think about getting some of our vendors, our contractors back out in the streams, looking for more detail on these projects beyond, hey, talk to the farmer about an easement. Well, what does that really mean? Or, plant some trees here. Well, how many? That kind of thing. So, and I do want to maybe hopefully get Karen Bates at our next meeting as well too. Maybe we can talk a little more about some of these projects. I think that's the most useful. Again, it's sort of, we don't really call it a call for proposals, but more of this discussion to get familiarity with different projects. Kate, are you raising your hand?
No, I'm not.
What is that?
I don't know.
I do. I need to mute. It's my wife with the vacuum cleaner in the back.
That's my hand moving around.
Oh, it's moving hands.
Yeah. Right.
That said, unless we have suggestions for the agenda for next month, which hopefully everyone will contact Dan about if you have them. Wow, another information laden meeting.
Yeah.
The wheels are spinning.
Mhm. Yeah, but please dive into that spreadsheet, talk to Karen, get your projects in there and. Yeah.
Good. Do I hear a motion to adjourn? Kent, a second?
Second.
Dave? Any opposed? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Dan, a very information-rich and successful meeting. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you guys. Thanks for all your great attendance and stuff. Appreciate it. We're all getting up to speed here and yeah, appreciate it.
Great.
All right, so long.